I decided to submit my papers to Biomed Central because it's an excellent journal, and because of the open access, everybody can see the papers once you've published on the web. It's very easy for other people to get to your research, and to be honest, it's very easy for yourself to get to the research 2 years later once you've forgotten where all the papers are. So the peer review was, from my experience, very similar to other journals which have good web access and web systems. So the submission was very nice and easy. And then the peer review was responsive and appropriate. So overall, the journal side of the journal, as it were, worked very smoothly. But it's a very nice, pleasant experience to submit through this process and for the review to happen through the website. I also know as a reviewer that this is much easier to handle than previous cases when perhaps you were sending documents physically in the mail. It was all a bit annoying and distracting. The visibility provided by BMC and genome biology is very important because I, as a researcher myself, know how easy it is to see these papers through the web, and I know therefore that other people interested in my papers will find the same experience. And a good example of this is that for some other papers which I previously published in closed access journals, you're often getting requests for physical reprints or things like that. For open access journals, there are fewer requests, and anybody who does have a problem, you just point them to the right web page, and it's all handled for you. So I have strong views on open access publishing, but really that comes from my own strong views on open data. I find it very difficult to understand people who want to keep their data closed when it's been funded by public domain resources for the good, generally, of everybody. I see no reason not to make your data fully accessible. And in the same spirit of that, I see open access publication really being an extension of the sort of openness that I've participated in both data and software. And my basic thoughts is that if you are funded as a scientist to do things in the public domain, you should put all your output into the public domain. And that includes your data, your software, and your publications. Now, of course, if you're funded by a private company, this isn't appropriate. But that's not the case for most researchers. We are funded by taxpayers or by charities, and it seems entirely appropriate that the results of that funded work are placed in an open way such that everybody can benefit from them. I think open access journals are an interesting development for the future of both databases and biology. I think the concept of a journal and the concept of a database are coming closer and closer together, and I can foresee in the future a scenario where there is even more joint both publication and data submission, each going to appropriate areas that are openly accessible by everybody in the world for getting either those results or that analysis or the underlying raw data. So I see open access publishing as the first step towards a sort of new future where all of the results of scientific research are available openly and in a coordinated manner. It's clear how open access publishing really helps further research into biology and bioinformatics. In particular, the full access to the text of these articles allows new techniques to be used in natural language processing, but also in picking up, for example, primer sequences directly from the materials and methods. This is information that's usually buried and lost, never accessible, and yet with open access publishing, this is directly accessible. And I can foresee, again, a large development in being able to link open access journals far better to other resources, such as genome sequence or expression compendia and stuff like this. Now, what is the consequence of that? Well, one consequence is that people who do publish in open access journals will find their work being more used and more accessible by a growing group of people, whereas people who continue to publish in closed journals will, I'm afraid to say, have their work dismissed or ignored over time. So my advice to many people is to publish in an open access manner in the future.